Let's begin with the stillness. Not the kind of silence you find in a modern room, padded and dark, held together by drywall and electricity. No, this is the kind of stillness that comes after a long, aching day of labor. A silence broken by firewood crackling low, by footsteps pacing above, by dogs settling into the straw. We're not in your bedroom anymore. We've stepped backward in time. Not centuries, more like sensations. And here we are. It is the Middle Ages, and someone somewhere is trying to fall asleep. Let's start where most people did. In the home. A small home. A peasant home. One room. Maybe two. That's generous. Walls of timber or wattle and daub. A roof thatched with straw or turf. Mud on the floor. Maybe a scattering of herbs beneath your feet. Part deodorant, part decor. There is no hallway. No upstairs. No soundproofed guest room with a lock on the door. Just one space. Shared. And it is bedtime. But sleep in the medieval world wasn't something you went to. It was something that happened to you. When the day could no longer be held back. When the fire burned down low. When the tools were put away and the sun, at long last, stopped watching. And so they settled. A mother, a father, their children, a cousin, a boarder, and perhaps someone's elderly aunt who hadn't said a word since sundown. The bed is not what you think of when you hear the word bed. It is not a mattress, not a rectangle of springs and fabric. It is a sack, stuffed with straw or rushes. Maybe wool if you're lucky, hay if you're not. They called it a palliasse. Some didn't even have that. They lay on bare straw with only cloaks or coats for blankets. And they laid close, body to body, out of affection maybe, but mostly out of warmth. A human radiator was better than any hearth. And besides, firewood cost money. Blankets were patched and repatched until they resembled a tapestry made of rags. Quilts were heirlooms. Furs were status symbols. And beds? Beds were for the rich. Most people slept in clumps. In piles, in whatever arrangement gave the smallest children the most warmth, and the snorers the least elbow room. And when you slept, you did not undress. There were no pajamas. You wore your tunic, your shift, your day clothes, unless you were of noble birth. And even then, undressing fully was more the exception than the rule. Sleep was not indulgent. It was necessary. And you made do with what you had. Let's dim the hearth now. The room is dark. Candles cost money. Torches were for walking, not resting. There is light, moonlight, if the sky is clear, starlight if you're lucky. Otherwise, nothing but shadows. The fire has burned down to embers. A soft red pulse in the corner of the room. Maybe a dog shifts nearby, scratching behind its ear with a thump-thump-thump of the leg. Maybe a child mumbles in their sleep. Someone coughs. Someone else lets out a slow, unashamed snore. There is no shame here, only exhaustion. Tomorrow will begin before the sun finishes rising. There will be bread to bake, wool to spin, water to carry. So for now they sleep. Let's visit a wealthier household. Stone walls, glass windows, if you can afford them, a canopy bed, a feather mattress, linen sheets, a fire in the hearth that someone else tends through the night. It sounds like luxury, and it is. But even here, you would likely not sleep alone. A servant might be in the room, sleeping on a bench. A child might be curled up at the foot of the bed, one foot peeking out from under a fur. Guests might share your chamber, even your bed, depending on rank and custom. It was not strange to share a bed with someone you barely knew. It was, in fact, expected. Beds were expensive to make and even more expensive to move. The materials, oak, pine, goose feathers, wool, were valuable. A good bed could cost as much as a horse. So if someone visited, they shared your sleep. Politeness was a blanket stretched thin. Let's pause on that idea. Sharing a bed with someone isn't what we imagine today. It wasn't intimate. It was practical. You kept to your side, or you didn't. You stayed warm. You endured the smell. You closed your eyes and hoped the night passed quickly. Let's talk about segmented sleep. In the medieval world, people often slept in two parts. The first sleep and the second sleep. You'd go to bed shortly after nightfall. Sleep for 4 hours. Wake up, not fully, but awake enough to stir the fire, say a prayer, whisper a thought, drink something warm, relieve yourself, or speak softly with the person beside you. This was the watch, a space between two sleeps. You might sit up for an hour or two, not restless, just available. Some people read scripture. Others recounted dreams. Some even visited neighbors, walked the streets, or listened to the sound of night. And then, without drama, they returned to bed and slept again. Second sleep. Until dawn. Let's imagine that moment between the two sleeps. You wake. There's no alarm, no clock. Your body simply knows. The air is cold. Your feet are colder. You curl your toes. You tuck them under your child's leg, or the fur blanket shared between 4 people. You shift. Your knee touches someone else's back. You don't speak. Not always. But you are aware. Aware of the night. Of your dreams. Of the distant sound of a dog barking. Of owls. Of the creak of old wood settling into its own version of sleep. There's a peace to this. A natural rhythm. One long exhale stretched across centuries. Let's now visit the monastic world. A monastery in the countryside. The bells ring before dawn. Matins, the first of many daily prayers. The monks stir from their pallets, roll from their straw bedding, and pull on their robes. They sleep in dormitories, rows of low beds, thin blankets, quiet breathing. There is little room for comfort. Sleep is a tool, a rest, nothing more. Too much of it is sloth. Too little is pride. They rise barefoot on stone, filing into the chapel like ghosts with voices. Their sleep is brief, but their dreams, maybe not. They do not speak of them, only of God. Let's talk now about the sounds of the night. You might think sleep was quieter in the past. No cars, no sirens, no phones, but noise is always with us. In a medieval home, night is filled with life. Crackling wood, whispering wind, the shifting weight of bodies adjusting in shared sleep. Mice skittering along beams, owls calling from the dark. Occasionally, a shout from the road, a drunkard, a thief, a watchman. Even in darkness, the world breathes, and those breaths are heard. Let's talk about the body. There was no concept of sleep hygiene, no orthopedics, no optimal neck position. You slept how you could, sometimes sitting up, sometimes curled on your side, sometimes across the bed, because someone else was sleeping the other way. You didn't count hours. You counted whether you felt strong enough to walk the next day, whether your back ached too much to lift a pail, whether your eyes burned from too many nights of interrupted rest. Insomnia wasn't a diagnosis. It was life, and you endured it. Let's talk about the mind. Dreams mattered. They were omens, messages from God, or warnings from below. A dream of water might mean fear. A dream of teeth could signal a loss. You shared them, not just in whispers, but in confession, in markets, at the hearth. And there were books of dream interpretation, passed from scholar to noble. You didn't ignore your dreams. You studied them. You feared them. You believed in them. Let's end here. Not with a bang. Not with a final moment of revelation, but with the softness of someone sighing into their pillow. A pillow made of feathers if you had them, or cloth folded upon cloth, or nothing at all. You turn over. The fire has gone out. The room smells like smoke and wool and sleep. There is someone breathing beside you, someone behind you, someone across the room. You are not alone, not in this sleep, not in this century, not in this story. Sleep is here. Let it take you. Let it fold you into the same dream as those who slept before you. Night is long, but it is gentle, and here, in this moment, you are safe. Tomorrow can wait. Let's begin again. But this time, let's lie down in a different place. We are not in a peasant's home, nor in a noble's chamber. We are in a medieval inn, a roadside haven, a place to rest tired feet and aching backs. The kind of place where sleep comes out of necessity, not luxury. The door creaks as it opens. A figure steps in, cloaked, mud-streaked, coin pouch thin. He is handed a candle stub and shown the way. There are no keys, no numbers on the door, just a hallway, and at the end a room, a long room, filled with other travelers already asleep. Some on benches, some on mats, some huddled near the hearth. The air smells like ale, sweat, damp wool, and something indistinct and eternal, fatigue. He nods, sets down his bag, and lies beside a stranger. This is sleep as community, not chosen, but understood. People slept beside people they didn't know, because that's how inns worked. You paid for space, not privacy. Beds were shared. Bedding was not always washed between guests. So you accepted the smell of someone else's journey. You accepted their snoring. You accepted their restless feet. Because the night was short and the road was longer. Let's stay here a while. A man in his 40s turns in his sleep. He reaches instinctively for his dagger and tucks it under his head. Not because he expects danger, but because sleep was vulnerable, and he'd rather be ready than regretful. A woman nearby is murmuring, dreaming aloud. She speaks a name, maybe her husband, maybe a saint, maybe something from deeper in her memory. No one stirs, because the murmurs of the sleeping are nothing new. They are part of the lullaby of shared rest. Another traveler gets up, barefoot, walking quietly through the dark. He finds the chamber pot, returns, steps over someone's legs, someone else's cloak, and lies back down. There are no complaints, no apologies, only the shared knowledge that sleep is sacred and fragile and must be handled with care. Let's leave the inn now. Let's go outside, to the open road, to the people who slept with no roof, travelers who ran out of coin or time, or both, pilgrims walking to shrines, minstrels wandering from feast to feast, outlaws hiding from lawmen. Many slept under trees, or in barns, with permission or without. They huddled in cloaks, curled beneath carts, dug into haystacks. Sleep was earned, not guaranteed. The earth was their mattress, the stars their ceiling, and the wind, sometimes cruel, sometimes gentle, tucked them in. Let's imagine that sleep. No walls to protect, only darkness and instinct. You sleep with one ear open. You keep a knife within reach. You wake at every crunch of twigs. You listen for wolves, or worse, for men. And when you finally do fall into dreams, they come fast and vivid, because sleep outside is deeper, and shorter, and more intense. Your body knows it has no second chances, so it seizes the rest like water in a drought. Let's return to the village. Let's sit beside an old woman. She's the widow who lives at the edge of town. She sleeps in a corner of her single-room cottage. Her bed is raised slightly, but only by a few bricks. Her mattress is sacks of old wool, felted and stiff. Above her hangs a charm, not decorative. Protective. It is said to ward off bad dreams. Next to her, a wooden bowl. Not for eating, for catching drips when the roof leaks. There's a cat at her feet. An old one, missing a patch of fur and most of its teeth. It purrs as she drifts off. She doesn't sleep in fear. She's known too many nights to fear them now. She sleeps slowly, one memory at a time. Her husband is long gone. Her children have moved away. But here, under her patched quilt, she finds the same comfort as she did when she was a girl. The fire is dying. The air is cold. But she is used to cold. She pulls the blanket to her chin. She closes her eyes. And the night welcomes her back. Let's talk about the body again. Sleep came with pain. There were no chiropractors, no ibuprofen, no ergonomic pillows. Your back hurt because your life was heavy. You bent over fields. You carried children. You lifted buckets, bricks, and baskets. Sleep didn't always fix you. Sometimes it made you worse. The rush-filled mattress turned flat in the middle. The straw poked. The wool itched. The cold crept up through the boards. And still you slept. Because your body needed it. Because there was no choice. And because sometimes exhaustion is stronger than discomfort. Let's talk about the things people brought to bed. Not teddy bears or eye masks, but tools, weapons, small sacks of grain or coin that they didn't trust to leave by the door. Some slept with their boots still on, in case of fire or flood or flight. Others tied twine around their waist and to their children's hands, to make sure no one wandered in their sleep. In some places, people slept in shifts, especially on farms or in larger homes. Someone always needed to watch the animals. Someone always needed to keep the fire from dying. Someone always had a baby to tend. So you learned to nap, to catch minutes like fish in a fast stream. Let's talk about the heat, or the lack of it. In winter, sleep became survival. Windows were sealed with animal skins or old cloth. The fire was banked with ash to keep the embers alive till morning. Everyone huddled close. Children were placed in the middle. Elders were wrapped in everything available. And still, frost formed on the inside of the walls. You could see your breath while you dreamed. Some nights, people slept with hot stones wrapped in cloth at their feet. Some filled earthenware jars with boiling water. Some did nothing and just shivered. And in the morning, they shook the ice off their shoes and started the day. Because winter didn't wait, and neither did life. Let's talk about superstition, because medieval people didn't think of sleep as biology. They thought of it as a journey. You left your body. You wandered, and if you weren't careful, something else might come in. So they hung charms. They said prayers. They drew signs in the air. Children were especially protected. They were given amulets, or tucked beneath crosses, or had salt placed near their heads, because sleep, while natural, was also sacred, and sometimes frightening. Nightmares were not just bad dreams. They were attacks, spiritual ones, caused by demons, or witches, or ill-willed spirits. And you didn't just wake from them. You recovered, over time, with herbs, with prayers, with whispered reassurances from people who understood. Let's speak of beds again. In wealthier homes, beds had canopies. Not for beauty, but for warmth. The fabric trapped heat. Curtains were drawn tight to keep in the warmth of bodies. And also for privacy, because in a home with servants, children, and visitors, privacy was a rare luxury. The canopy was a room within a room. It muffled sound. It held secrets. It allowed people to whisper things the walls couldn't hear. Some beds were passed down for generations, engraved with initials, inscribed with dates. They weren't just furniture. They were family history. and people died in them as often as they were born in them. Because beds were for everything. Not just sleeping, but also birthing, and mourning, and storytelling, and waiting. Always waiting. Let's end this part not with a fade to black, but with a moment of stillness. You're lying on your side. Your back aches. The fire has gone out. The air smells like wood smoke, and a little bit of everything that came before. There's a rhythm to the room now. The breaths, the rustles, the snores. The wind outside taps against the shutters, testing them. But the house holds. You pull your blanket tighter. You think of the second sleep still to come. You think of the dream you had before. The one with the river, and the horse, and the face you didn't recognize. You wonder what it means. You wonder if it was sent. And then, like the world itself exhaling, you fall back asleep. Let's begin again. Not with footsteps, not with fire, but with sound. The kind of sound that only happens in a shared bed. A snort, a groan, the faint thud of someone turning over and bumping into a wall, or into someone else, because sleep in the Middle Ages was rarely silent, and it was never solitary. Let's take a moment to talk about snoring. Not a flaw, not something that sends a partner to the couch. Just life. Snoring meant you were breathing. It meant you were resting. It meant that, unlike your neighbor who'd been coughing all winter, you might actually wake up in the morning with both lungs working. You didn't complain. You didn't sigh. You might nudge or elbow or groggily grumble a turnover. But that was all, because there were other, bigger things to lose sleep over. Like the rats. Let's talk about them now. Rats were everywhere. You tried to keep them out, sure. You stuffed cloth in the cracks in the walls. You hung herbs to mask the scent of food. You tried to keep your scraps sealed, your grain suspended in baskets from the ceiling. But rats are clever, and small, and always hungry. So it wasn't uncommon to hear them at night, scratching, scuttling, even chewing through a corner of your bed sack. You didn't scream. You didn't jump on a chair. You rolled over, grumbled, and made a mental note to reset the traps in the morning. Because sleep could not wait for perfection. Let's move now to a monastery again. Not the quiet chapel, but the scriptorium, where monks copied books by hand, their eyes sore, their fingers stiff, and when the work was done, they slept. Not on down mattresses, but on thin mats, side by side. No talking, no comfort, just the rhythm of breath and the occasional rustle of wool. They rose several times a night for prayer, and yet many recorded dreams, vivid ones, dreams of angels, of devils, of tasks unfinished and scrolls unrolled. They did not dismiss these dreams. They studied them, wrote them. Some even feared them, because a dream could be a calling, or a warning, or a trap. Sleep, even for the holy, was not always peaceful. Let's talk about marriage, about couples, about the strange, practical romance of medieval matrimony. Yes, couples shared beds, but not always out of love, often out of duty. Beds were a place of politics, producing heirs, forming alliances, securing inheritances, and so many a nobleman and noblewoman shared a bed in silence. They might turn away from each other, or lie stiffly beside one another, each lost in private thoughts while their shared blanket was the only thing connecting them. Still, not all was cold. Some marriages found warmth over time, shared glances at dawn, hands brushing while reaching for the same goblet, even soft whispers under the canopy when the wind howled outside, because sleep has a way of softening people, even the proud, even the powerful. Let's visit a great hall, a castle's belly, where guests and guards and grooms slept in rows, some on benches, some on rushes laid over stone, some under cloaks, some beside the dogs they fed and trained. This was sleep as necessity. You didn't ask who you were beside. You didn't complain about snoring. You found a corner. You curled into it. You hoped no one stole your boots. And in the morning, you rose and made way for others. This was how castles breathed. People came and went, slept and woke, and the walls remembered none of them. Let's speak of illness, because sleep and sickness were lovers, tangled together in every village, every home, every body. If you had a fever, you slept more. If you were wounded, you were told to rest. If you were cursed, or believed you were, you might be prescribed sleep as part of a ritual. People believed dreams could reveal cures, that saints visited in the night, that healing could come in visions. And so, when someone was ill, the house grew quiet, not to let them rest, but to let them listen, to their bodies, to their dreams, to the whispers of something greater. Let's speak of birth. Women gave birth in their beds, surrounded by midwives, family, sometimes neighbors. The bed was made ready. Sheets were laid down, warm water prepared, and when the baby came, it was wrapped and placed near the mother's chest, sometimes in the same bed, sometimes in a cradle at the foot. And that night, if it went well, the mother would sleep, finally, after hours of pain. She would sleep with the smell of blood and milk and fire all around her, and with a new heartbeat in the room. Sleep after birth was the first peace in a long time, and the last for even longer, because babies do not care for segmented sleep. They wake when they wake, and the medieval night, already crowded with noise and need, now had one more voice. Let's speak of death. Many people died in their sleep. Some were lucky enough to do so in their beds, others on pallets, or in corners. But when someone passed in the night, the room changed. You could feel it. The warmth shifted. The breathless quiet wrapped the body differently. And the bed, suddenly, became something else. Not a place of rest, but of remembering. Candles were lit, prayers whispered, coins placed on eyes. And sleep came harder to those left behind, because the bed was not just a bed anymore. It was a threshold. Let's talk of the poor, the truly poor, those who didn't have homes. They slept in doorways, in alleys, in the corners of churches when permitted. They wrapped themselves in old sacks. Newspaper didn't exist, but rags layered could keep a little warmth. Sometimes they begged for a spot near a fire. Sometimes they dug into hay in a stable, pretending to be asleep when the owner came by. There were no shelters, no outreach, only cold nights and hopeful dawns. And when they slept, it was fast. It was shallow, but it was something. And in those short moments of warmth, they dreamed too, because even the poorest are given dreams. Let's talk about the sounds of waking. The rooster, the creak of rope and wood, the shout of a milkmaid, the bang of a pail, the bell in the tower, calling for matins, or for market, or for morning, children crying, dogs barking, and someone, somewhere, always coughing. Waking was rarely quiet, and so, neither was the transition. You stirred. You yawned, you stretched, if there was room, and you sat up slowly, brushing straw from your hair and pulling on your boots. Or, if you slept in them, just stood and went about your day. No one asked, "Did you sleep well?" Because sleep wasn't a matter of quality. It was a question of survival. Let's end not with a bed this time, but with a floor, a chapel floor covered in rushes. A pilgrim has made it here. After weeks of walking, blisters, rain, stolen coin. But here he is. The priest lets him sleep inside, just for one night. He curls into his cloak, tucks his hands beneath his chest, and listens to the echo of prayers, to the creak of stone cooling, to the presence of something he cannot name. And he sleeps, not because it is comfortable, but because he has arrived. Sleep is not a luxury here. It is a blessing, given freely, taken gratefully. And in the dark, among saints and shadows, he breathes deeply. Because tonight, he sleeps under a roof. Tomorrow, he walks again. But for now, sleep holds him, and he does not resist. Let's begin tonight with footsteps. Soft ones, padded, measured. Someone is walking the stone corridors of a castle at midnight. Not pacing, not lost, just walking, because sleep has left them, and they are searching for something. Not light, not answers, just a little warmth, a little comfort, maybe even just a quieter shadow. We are inside a castle, a real one this time, not a fairy tale. This place is cold. Even in summer, the stone soaks up chill like a sponge and releases it bit by bit into the toes of those who dare walk barefoot. The fire from dinner still glows in the great hall, but it has dropped to embers. And in the upper chambers, where tapestries hang like faded memories, someone is trying to sleep, or trying not to. Let's go to them. It is a lady, young, married, not by love, but by contract. She lies beneath a heavy fur. A candle flickers on a low table. She stares at the ceiling, listens to the wind pressing against the shutters, and breathes, slowly, carefully. The man beside her sleeps deeply, his breath loud and uneven, his arm thrown across his chest, not her. She does not touch him. She pulls the blanket higher and closes her eyes. Sleep does not come easily in silk. Not always. It comes in small bursts, interrupted by dreams, by regrets, by the quiet ache of a life already decided. She dreams of gardens, not because she loves flowers, but because there no one speaks. No one asks anything of her, and she can lie in the grass and feel the sun on her face. But that's just a dream, and dreams always end. Let's leave her there for now, and step into a different castle, one where the servants sleep, not in feather beds, but in the kitchens, in the corners of stairwells, in narrow closets where linens are stored. They lay down on sacks of flour, on folded cloaks, on cold tiles if they must. They are not invited into bedrooms. They are not allowed to sleep past sunrise. They sleep when they can. 5 hours maybe. Interrupted twice. Because someone always needs something. Hot water, dry towels, a message delivered. So they rise in the dark, move silently, and return to their pallets like ghosts trying not to wake the living. Sleep for them is not a right. It is borrowed time. Let's talk about children. Because children, even in the Middle Ages, hated going to bed. They fussed. They squirmed. They asked for water. They begged to sleep by the fire instead of in the loft. And just like today, parents made deals. Lie still, and I'll tell you a story. Close your eyes, and I'll give you the last bit of honey bread in the morning. So the children lay back, staring at the rafters. The shadows danced on the ceiling. Mice skittered in the thatch, and the stories began. Tales of wolves, of knights, of saints, and of witches who walked the fields at night. Not always to scare, sometimes to warn, sometimes to teach, and sometimes just to pass the time until the child's breath slowed and sleep folded them in. Let's visit a cloister, where women in veils walk in silence. They do not speak after sundown, not unless necessary. Their beds are wooden, their blankets thin, and their hearts, sometimes, are heavy. They pray before they sleep, kneeling by their mattresses, whispering to the Virgin, or to no one at all. Some dream of heaven, others of what they left behind. Not sin, but simplicity. A home, a sibling, the warmth of a sunlit kitchen. They do not tell these dreams, but they feel them. And sometimes, the tears that fall are not from guilt, but from the weight of memory. They wipe them away. They sleep, and in the morning they sing. Let's speak now of nuns and monks in their final years. Old, bent, their fingers gnarled from decades of work. Their voices soft, even in waking. They sleep more than the younger ones. They are allowed. No one scolds them if they doze at midday. No one wakes them unless they must. Their dreams are often full of voices. Old friends, lost siblings, the sound of their mother calling them from another room. They sometimes smile in their sleep, or cry, or whisper names no one else knows. And in those dreams, they are not monks, not nuns, not cloistered figures in heavy robes. They are children, running barefoot on muddy roads. And for a moment, just a moment, they remember what joy felt like. Let's return to the town, to the midwives, because they had a strange relationship with sleep. They were called at all hours, by candlelight, by shouts, by messengers banging on the door. They kept bundles ready, cloths, herbs, blades, salt. They often slept with one shoe on, just in case. And when they did sleep, it was brief, light, because any moment might call them back into the world, to coax a child into breath, or to hold a hand that would never be warm again. Their dreams were often of birth, of crying, of blood, of mothers thanking them or blaming them. And still they slept, because even the weary must rest. Even the healers, even the ones who knew too much. Let's visit a merchant's house. He has done well, not rich, but not poor. His family has 2 rooms. The children sleep in one, he and his wife in the other. Their bed is carved, simple. Their mattress is wool. Their covers patched but clean. They talk before sleeping. Soft voices. Laughter sometimes. He tells her about a man in the market who tried to sell him a rooster with only one eye. She tells him the bread rose too fast and burned on the bottom. They speak of small things, because the big ones are too heavy for night. And then, without ceremony, they sleep, their hands touching beneath the blanket, the fire flickering out, and the quiet settling in. Let's talk about furniture, because beds were not always beds. Sometimes they were benches, sometimes chests, sometimes people lay beneath tables, using them as shelter from drafts. There were trundle beds, small cots that slid beneath bigger ones. Children were often tucked into those, rolled out at night like drawers, and in the morning, pushed away. Some slept in hammocks of sorts, netting or cloth tied in corners, mostly sailors, or prisoners, or those in cramped quarters. It swayed, it creaked, but it kept you off the cold ground. And that was worth the motion. Let's pause here. You're lying down now. The blanket is rough, but warm. There's a dog curled at your feet. It's breathing slow. Your body aches, but it's the good kind of ache. The kind that says, you did enough today. There's a fire somewhere nearby. Someone humming. Someone whispering a prayer. You let your eyes close. And once again, sleep finds you. You don't resist. You never do. Not here. Not now. Not when the past is this soft. Not when the story wraps around you like wool. You dream of rivers, of bells, of footsteps on stone, and none of it matters, because you're asleep, and sleep, in every century, is the most beautiful escape. Let's begin this part with a creak. Just one. The kind that comes from an old wooden floorboard pressed too hard by a careful step. It's the middle of the night, or, more accurately, the middle of the second night. You see, As we've touched on before, people in the Middle Ages didn't always sleep straight through. They often followed what's now called segmented sleep. The first sleep, from dusk until sometime past midnight. Then an hour or more of wakefulness. And then the second sleep, from early morning until the rooster crowed, or the bell rang, or the sun began licking at the cracks in the shutters. So what did people do during that midnight wakefulness? Let's wander, quietly, into that hour. A woman stirs. She doesn't rise quickly. There's no alarm, no startle. Just a natural loosening of the dream, and then the slow return of consciousness. She lies there for a moment. Her eyes adjust. The hearth has cooled, but there's still a glow. She slips out from under the blanket, wraps her shawl tighter, steps past the sleeping form of her husband, and sits by the dying fire. There is no rush, no task, just a kind of soft attentiveness. She might pray. She might knit. She might simply sit and think. This is her time, when the world is hushed, when no one needs anything, when the weight of the day has evaporated, and the weight of tomorrow has not yet arrived. Many people use this hour, some to pray, some to make love, some to stoke the fire, write letters, or feed a child who woke hungry. There were even herbal remedies meant to promote return to sleep after this period. They called it the watch, the quiet middle between two sleeps. Let's stay there a bit. Let's peek into a cottage where an old man wakes. He has no intention of rising. His bladder woke him, but he doesn't want to go outside. Not in the cold, not in the wind. So he holds still. He counts the knots in the beam above him, listens to the owl, listens to his wife breathing, and after a while, the urge passes. He drifts again, half dreaming, not yet fully asleep, but not quite awake. In that strange middle territory where thoughts and memories melt together. He sees his father, sees a road he walked once in spring. He smells bread, and then, nothing. Sleep has claimed him again. Let's speak now of vermin, because no matter how cozy a bed may be, it was rarely a sanctuary from the things that crawl. Bed bugs, fleas, lice, mites, they were common, expected, sometimes tolerated, sometimes battled. Straw mattresses were taken outside and beaten. Sunlight and smoke were used to cleanse. Ashes rubbed into crevices. Garlic tucked near bedding. Some households laid herbs between sheets, lavender, pennyroyal, tansy, to repel insects and spirits alike. But even then, the bites came. The itch woke you, and you scratched, sighed, and tried not to think about it. Sleep wasn't a pristine experience. It was imperfect and precious, and no one expected comfort without compromise. Let's visit a shepherd. He sleeps outside, beneath a lean-to. His sheep are spread across the hill. There is no fire, only a blanket, a dog, and the stars. He sleeps in stretches. An hour here, 2 there, always listening. Wolves are a threat. So are thieves. So sleep is cautious, yet still deep. There is something ancient about sleeping beneath the open sky. Your breath rises into the air. Your dreams float upwards, uncontained by rafters or thatch. The ground is hard. The night is long. But in this silence, you hear everything. And eventually, exhaustion outweighs vigilance. The shepherd sleeps. Let's talk about fear. Because while the night could be peaceful, it was also full of unknowns. Darkness was not just absence of light. It was presence of danger. And in medieval minds, that danger came in many forms. Not just wolves and rats, but spirits, demons, witches, revenants. People placed iron nails under pillows to ward off evil. Salt circles by the hearth. Children were given charms to keep nightmares away. Dreams themselves were messages, Warnings. Sometimes even accusations. A woman might wake crying, convinced she had sinned in her dream and needed confession. A man might dream of fire and wake convinced the devil had visited. Sleep was not separate from spirituality. It was interwoven with belief. Let's sit beside a young monk. He sleeps lightly, not from discomfort, but from discipline. He's been trained to rise for matins, a pre-dawn prayer. The bell will ring soon. But for now, he lies in his narrow cell, hands folded on his chest. Dreams come to him like whispers. He dreams of Latin he hasn't yet memorized, of wheat fields he left behind when he entered the abbey. He dreams of firelight on a manuscript, the steady scratch of a quill. He wakes just before the bell. As he always does, he swings his feet down, touches the cold floor, and begins the day with a bowed head. Let's speak of travelers, not pilgrims this time, but messengers, soldiers, wanderers. They slept where they could, sometimes under bridges, sometimes in barns, sometimes curled on church steps. They carried their bedding with them, a rolled blanket, a pack, maybe a bottle. They tucked coins in their shoes, and they trusted no one. Sleep was short, often interrupted, but still, it was sleep. And when morning came, they were up again, moving, always moving. Let's go now to a manor. Not the Lord's room, but the nursery. A wet nurse rocks a baby. She is tired. Her own child is at home, cared for by her sister. But she is here, in the service of a noble family. She hums softly, not for the baby, but for herself. Sleep teases her, taunts her. She leans against the wall, eyes fluttering. And when the child finally quiets, she wraps him carefully, places him in his crib, and curls up on the floor nearby. Not because she has to, but because she can't walk back to her quarters. Not tonight. She sleeps in the warmth of candle smoke and cradle breath. She dreams of her child, not this one, her own, and wakes with wet cheeks. Let's pause again. Let's come back to your bed, wherever it is. You're here, in the quiet of now. Your body rests, but your mind wanders. That's okay. It's what minds do. You're not supposed to sleep instantly. You're supposed to ease into it, like a boat slipping into water, like dusk bleeding into night. You think of the old monk, the shepherd, the snoring servant. You see their faces, but you don't know their names. They're with you, though, in your mind, sharing this strange little space between consciousness and rest. And when you close your eyes, really close them, they fade, like breath on glass, and you sleep, because that's what people do. Even now, even then, always. Let's begin with sound. Not loud, not sudden, just a sound that fills the room the way mist fills a valley. The crackle of an old log giving into fire, the drip of water from a leaky roof beam onto stone, the breath of someone sleeping, steady and slow. In the medieval world, sleep was not silent. It was symphonic. Let's enter a village home. Single room, low ceiling. The fire in the center has burned low, but the heat lingers. Not everyone is asleep yet. An older child tosses a handful of dried herb stalks onto the coals, not to cook, but to scent the air and smother the smoke. A grandmother mumbles in her dreams. A baby murmurs. The dog shifts. A stool creaks as someone adjusts their blanket. This is not noise. This is life. Sleep in the Middle Ages did not require quiet. It required rhythm, and the rhythm came from all around. Let's move to a nobleman's chamber, the kind with thick tapestries on every wall. To keep out drafts, and maybe to keep in secrets, the room is large. But he does not sleep alone. There are servants just beyond the curtains, guards in the hall, a dog at the foot of the bed. even a taster, asleep on a bench near the hearth. Because power breeds fear, and fear doesn't sleep well. The nobleman wakes often, checks the locks, listens, stares at the ceiling painted with saints and constellations, and finally falls asleep again. Not with trust, but with exhaustion. Let's talk about dreams now, because in the medieval world, dreams were serious. They were not just passing images. They were messages from God, from demons, from your own guilty conscience. A dream of falling, you might be called to confess. A dream of drowning, best check your roof and your soul. A dream of a lost loved one, they might be trying to tell you something. Priests kept records of dreams. Midwives interpreted them. Mothers whispered them to each other over washing buckets. There were books full of meanings, symbol by symbol, and not all dreams were welcome. Some were feared. There are records of people fasting before bed, hoping to avoid nightmares. Others slept with a relic under their pillow. A saint's bone, a piece of cloth, even a dried flower blessed on a holy day. They wanted to steer their dreams, or silence them. Let's visit a prison, a real one, cold, damp. A man sleeps on straw. No blanket, no fire. He pulls his knees to his chest. His wrists are sore from the irons he wore last week. He dreams of bread. Just bread. That's all. When he wakes, the straw is wet. But he doesn't rise. Because what's the point? There is no morning here. Just another hour of stone and hunger and waiting. Still, even he sleeps, because even suffering gives way to sleep. Eventually, let's move now to a ship, a merchant vessel, bound for Bordeaux. The men sleep in shifts, cramped, unwashed. The hold smells of salt, fish, and sweat. They lie side by side, hammocks strung like crooked smiles across the beams. The ship rocks, groans, moans like it's alive. And somehow, in this strange rhythm of wood and water, they sleep. They dream of land, of ale, of women. Some dream of falling, but they always wake before they hit the sea. Let's talk about the bed itself. What it meant. It wasn't just a place to rest. It was a symbol of wealth, of rank, of family. Peasants slept in shared spaces, on rushes, on boards. But even among the poor, there was pride in having a place to sleep. A straw mat kept clean, a blanket passed down, a pillow stuffed with feathers, even if half of them escaped during the night. The marriage bed was sacred. It was blessed, sometimes sprinkled with holy water, because it wasn't just for sleep. It was for legacy. And for some, a bed was the only space that belonged truly to them. Their corner of the world, their pause in the middle of everything else. Let's talk about bed sharing again, because we romanticize solitude now. But then, solitude meant danger, or punishment, or illness. People shared beds not just for space, but for safety, warmth, comfort. Strangers at inns slept shoulder to shoulder. Travelers at monasteries were given room beside the hearth, not in a separate cell. You learned not to mind. You turned away politely. You kept your elbows to yourself. You adapted. There are even records of judges sharing beds while traveling on circuit. Noblemen sharing beds with their squires. Not out of intimacy, but out of necessity. Because in a world without insulation, without radiators, without private guest rooms, sharing was survival. Let's visit a battlefield now. Not the battle itself. The camp. The night before. Men sleep in armor, or wrapped in cloaks, under carts, beside fires, their swords within reach. But many don't sleep at all. They stare at the sky, at the flames, at their hands. They think of home, of brothers, of what might happen at dawn. Sleep when it comes, is shallow. They jerk awake at sounds. They grip hilts before realizing it was only a fox. They pray, some of them. Others curse. And when morning comes, they rise like ghosts. Unrest. Unready. But awake. Let's move one more time. To a sickbed. A real one. A child lies sweating beneath blankets. The mother holds vigil. Her eyes are red. She hasn't slept in 2 nights. But she keeps her hand on the child's chest. Watches the rise and fall. She counts the seconds between breaths. The healer said it's just a fever. But she knows better. She's seen death. Smelled it. Heard it in the last gasps of neighbors and friends. So she does not sleep. She waits. Prays. Sings a soft lullaby. And in the quiet, the child stirs. Murmurs. Turns. The fever breaks. And the mother, at last, leans back. Still watching. But her eyes close. Just for a moment. And in that moment, sleep. Not peace. Not relief. Just sleep. The truest kind. Born of exhaustion. And hope. And gratitude. Let's rest here too. The fire is low. Your limbs are heavy. You've walked through villages and castles and ships and monasteries. You've stood beside nobles and beggars. Felt the cold stone and the scratch of straw. Now it's your turn. The blanket covers your shoulder. The room stills. And whatever sound is left becomes music. The music of sleep. Not perfect, not silent, but yours. Always yours. Let's begin this part not with a bed, not with a fire, not even with a room. Let's begin with belief. Because in the medieval world, sleep was not just a physical act. It was a spiritual event, a crossing, a surrender, a time when the soul wandered, or so they thought, and sometimes it didn't return. Let's sit in a church just before midnight. The candles have burned low. The stone walls hold the echo of chants long finished. A monk sits not in prayer, but in contemplation. He has finished his matins, and now he simply sits, eyes closed, but not asleep, because sleep to him is a risk, not to the body, but to the soul. What if he dies before waking? What if his last thoughts were not of God? He fingers the beads of his rosary. He has memorized the prayers, not just for life, but for death in sleep, because it was common, quiet, sudden, and in a world where heaven and hell were not metaphors, the stakes were high. So the monk whispers a final avenue and leans back, trusting that angels will keep watch while he drifts. Let's visit a widow. She sleeps alone, not by choice. Her husband died last spring. The room feels bigger now, not because it is, but because absence echoes louder than presence. She has moved to the edge of the bed, still leaves his side untouched, still turns to say something in the dark and remembers halfway through. She dreams of him, almost every night. Sometimes he's young, sometimes old, sometimes she knows he's dead, even in the dream. But still she smiles. She keeps a piece of his cloak beneath her pillow. She doesn't tell anyone, not because it's shameful, but because it's hers. And in sleep she finds him, just for a moment. Let's speak of temptation, because not all midnight thoughts were holy. Many were haunted by desire, by guilt, by the memory of skin. A young man in the priory tosses under his blanket, not from heat, but from the ache of being flesh in a world that demands spirit. He remembers the girl from the market, the way she smiled. He remembers the warmth of a stolen kiss months ago. And he prays, hard, but the thoughts come anyway. Not sinful, but human. He cries, softly. No one hears. Sleep comes only when the body gives in, when the guilt is drowned by fatigue. And in the morning, he rises, washes his face, and chants the psalms as though the night never happened. Let's now walk with a cobbler's apprentice. He is 15. His bed is a pile of leather scraps beside the workbench. He has no father, no mother, just the master and the mistress, who give him work and food and very little else. He sleeps alone in the workshop. The rats are loud. The air smells of pitch. He pulls a cloth over himself and stares at the tools. He dreams of shoes he cannot afford, of boots he will make but never wear. In his dreams, he walks through fields, soft grass, no stones, no calluses, no bruises. When he wakes, his fingers are stiff, but he smiles, because sleep is the only place he owns anything. Let's step into a midwife's home. Not the one we met earlier. This one is older. She sleeps surrounded by herbs. Bundles hang from the beams. Roots in jars. Pouches under the bed. She has charms tucked beneath the pillow. One for safe travel. One to keep spirits at bay. And a small, worn cross wrapped in blue thread. She is not sure whether it's superstition or faith. But she no longer cares. She has seen too much. She has seen women die in childbirth, children born without breath, men waste away from fevers no one could name. So she believes in everything, every spell, every prayer, every ghost story. Because what else is there? She sleeps facing the door, always, just in case someone knocks, or something enters. Let's visit a night, not on campaign, but at home. The war is over. For now, his armor sits in the corner, his sword beneath the bed. He sleeps beside his wife, but they do not touch, not because of coldness, but distance. His dreams are not gentle. They are full of shouting, steel, fire. He wakes often, sometimes gasping, sometimes sweating. He says nothing, just lies back down. He drinks a little before bed now. Not too much, just enough to dull the edges. His wife watches him, says nothing. She knows, and she hopes that one day the dreams will soften. But they haven't. Not yet. Let's talk now about omens, because the night was full of them. A howl at the wrong hour? A sign. A lamp that flickers out for no reason? A death. Dreaming of teeth falling out? Someone will betray you. Dreaming of water? Watch for sickness. Some families kept a dream book, passed down, with pages yellowed and ink faded, each symbol matched with a fate, a guide to navigating the world behind your eyelids. Even kings consulted dream interpreters, and peasants whispered warnings over their porridge, because dreams were maps, and sleep was the journey. Let's look now at fear of sleep itself. Some were afraid, truly afraid, of what sleep meant, because to sleep was to let go, of control, of vigilance, of the body. And for those who had been attacked in sleep, by robbers, by nightmares, by illness, it was no longer safe. A woman who had been robbed while resting in her cottage kept her boots on every night for a year. A man who survived a fire while asleep refused to sleep indoors again. He slept in his garden, under a canvas, through wind and snow, just in case, because the mind forgets, but the body doesn't, and sleep, though sweet, could also feel like surrender. Let's pause now. You've heard enough. Not too much, but enough for tonight. The fire beside you burns low. The air is still, and outside, a wind has picked up. Not harsh, just present. You pull the blanket up, a little higher. You think of monks and widows and midwives and apprentices. You wonder what they would think of your bed, of your sheets, of your silence. And you smile, because though the centuries are long, sleep is the same. It has always been the bridge between the noise and the peace, between the body and the dream, between the world and you. So let go. Let the centuries fold themselves like sheets around you. You are warm. You are safe. And you are already halfway asleep. Let's begin this part with someone awake. Not because they want to be, but because it's their job. A watchman stands at the edge of a town wall. His breath hangs in the air. He holds a lantern, not to see, but to be seen. He walks a slow circle on the parapet, boots crunching frost, eyes scanning the horizon for anything, flames, movement, shadows. He does not expect an attack tonight, but expectation is not the point. His job is vigilance. His reward? A bench in the guardhouse, a bowl of soup, and a few hours of sleep at dawn when others rise. The town sleeps because he does not, and so he walks, again and again. Let's move now to a mother. Young, exhausted, her baby is 4 months old. Teething, restless. She has not slept more than 2 hours in a row for weeks. She dozes in the chair by the hearth, head tilted, mouth slightly open. Her hand never leaves the cradle. Even in sleep it rocks, barely, like a twitch, a reflex. She dreams of nothing, because dreams require deeper sleep than she can afford. But she still smiles when the baby coos. Even in her fatigue, there is love, raw, fierce, unshakable. And then her head drops again, and again. The long, quiet war of motherhood continues. Let's talk about sleepwalking. Yes, it happened. Even then, they didn't have a name for it. Not a medical one. They called it wandering sleep, or night travel. And they feared it, because a person who walks without waking might be cursed, or touched by spirits. There are stories of men found in the fields at dawn, barefoot, confused, of women who spoke in tongues while climbing onto rooftops, not possessed, not mad, just caught between waking and sleep. Some families tied a bell to the bedpost. Others placed dried rosemary under the pillow, said to ground the soul. Still, it happened, and the dreamers never remembered. They only saw the muddy feet, the cuts on their hands, the open door, and wondered what part of them had been out walking while their bodies stayed behind. Let's visit a mill. A simple one, stone, by a creek. The miller has gone to bed. His apprentice sleeps on sacks of grain. But the mill itself doesn't sleep. The wheel turns. The water flows. A slow, grinding heartbeat in the dark. Some said mills were haunted, not because of ghosts, but because they never rested. The noise, the motion, the feeling that something was always awake, always watching. A monk once wrote that mills were the devil's lungs, breathing without stopping, whispering into the night. But they fed the village, so the fear was tolerated. Let's now walk into a leper house. Quiet, removed from the town. The beds are spaced far apart, not from privacy, but from fear. Each figure lies under a coarse blanket, most asleep, some murmuring, some staring at the ceiling. They do not share their dreams, because even sleep is different when the world has marked you. They dream of before the sores, before the bells around their necks, before the separation. And in those dreams, they are touched, held. No fear, no flinching, just arms, and warmth, and love. Let's speak now of animals, because they too shaped sleep. Dogs curled at feet, cats tucked against ribs, chickens in baskets at the foot of the bed. Even cows, in some homes, shared the living space, giving off body heat through the wall. Sleep in the Middle Ages was not antiseptic. It was shared, intertwined, alive. The rustle of feathers, the soft grunt of a pig. These were lullabies, not annoyances, and the warmth they gave, both literal and emotional, made winter survivable. Let's go to a castle gatehouse. A young man guards the drawbridge. He is new to the job, eager, but cold. So cold, he stamps his feet, wraps his cloak tighter. He was told not to sit, to stay alert, but after hours of stillness, he leans against the wall, eyes heavy. Just for a moment, he thinks. Just a blink. But it's not a blink. It's a slide. Into sleep. A dangerous one. He jerks awake 10 minutes later. Heart pounding. Shame flushing his face. No one saw. But still, he whispers a prayer. Not of thanks, but of apology. He will not close his eyes again. Not tonight. Let's talk now of insomnia. Because even without screens or caffeine or electric light, people still couldn't sleep sometimes. They worried. About crops. About debt. About sins. About loss. A merchant in Bruges wrote in his journal, "I did not sleep for thinking of the ships." A priest once confessed to fearing the dreams that came when sleep finally did. They tried remedies. Warm milk, wine, herbs boiled into bitter tea. One man swore by placing a copper coin beneath his tongue. Another laid stones in a circle around his bed. Protection, he claimed. Did it work? Maybe. Maybe not. But sometimes the ritual helps more than the remedy. Let's visit a widower. Old. Alone. He hasn't spoken to anyone in 3 days. He cooks. He reads. He feeds the chickens. And at night, he lies down with a blanket that once belonged to his wife. He talks to her. Not out loud. Just in his mind. He tells her about the hen that escaped. About the boy in town who begged for bread. About the ache in his knee. And when he's finished, he closes his eyes. And waits for the dream. The one where she stands by the window. Smiling. Not speaking. Just there. It doesn't come every night, but often enough. And when it does, he wakes with wet cheeks and a full heart. Sleep is the only place he sees her now, and he is grateful. Let's pause again. Let your own body settle. Let your breathing match the rhythm of the stories. Let the names and faces fade. You are not in a leper house, or a mill, or a castle tower. You are here, now, in your own space, but still surrounded by centuries, by all those who slept before you. They didn't have memory foam, or lavender candles, or blackout curtains, but they slept, some well, some not, some dreaming, some fearing, all of them human, just like you. And now, it's your turn to close your eyes, to listen to the silence, to find yourself drifting, not away, but inward, into rest, into the hush, into sleep. Let's begin with something simple. A sigh. Not from pain, not from sadness, just a sigh at the end of a long day. The kind that falls from your chest without asking. A release. That sound has echoed for centuries. From haylofts, from hearths, from travelers curling against tree trunks, from queens sliding under silken sheets, from children nestling into bundles of wool and dreams. That sigh, quiet and warm, is the doorway into sleep. Let's open it and step inside. Let's return to a farmhouse where the day begins before the sun and ends long after it's gone. A woman stretches her back by the fire. The dishes are done. The bread is rising under cloth. And the youngest child has finally stopped crying. She washes her hands, not because they're dirty, but because it feels like a ritual, a drawing of the line. And then she walks to the far corner, to the bedding. It's not fancy. A straw mattress wrapped in linen. One blanket, shared with a husband who is already asleep, snoring softly. She lies down slowly. Every muscle aches. Every joint sings. And still, she smiles, because for the next few hours, there will be nothing to carry but her own breath. Let's talk about the material of sleep, the physical things. Not dreams, not silence. The stuff, because medieval people built their rest from what they had. Mattresses were filled with straw, or reeds, or feathers, if you were wealthy or lucky. Poor families reused sacks from grain, stuffed with anything soft, moss, dried leaves, even wool scraps. These beds were beaten often, not in anger, but to fluff them, to chase out insects, to shift the lumps and clumps into something that resembled comfort. Linen sheets, when they existed, were washed rarely, maybe once a season, and blankets? Often made from wool, thick, heavy, not decorative, just warm. Pillows were a luxury. Many slept without them, or used rolled cloaks, or bags of grain. Sleep then was tactile. It smelled like earth. It felt like coarse fibers against the skin. It crackled when you moved. Let's lie down beside a craftsman, a stonemason. He has spent the day lifting, chiseling, climbing scaffolds. His arms are sore, his knuckles cracked, but his work is good, honest. He eats a small supper, wipes his hands on his tunic, and lies down on his cot. He says nothing, because there's no one to say it to. But if he could, he'd say this: I am proud of what I've done today, and that pride softens the straw. Let's visit a minstrel. He has wandered all day from village to village, played songs, told stories, earned a few coins. He sleeps in the barn of a generous farmer, among cows and hay. He hums to himself before sleep, a tune he hasn't written yet, a melody still half-formed. He falls asleep with his hand on his lute, just in case he wakes and remembers the rest. Let's talk about winter, because winter made sleep different. It wasn't just colder, it was longer. People went to bed earlier, woke later, sometimes spent 16 hours in bed. Not asleep the whole time, of course, but there, wrapped, waiting. The world slowed. There were fewer chores, fewer distractions, fewer visitors. In some villages, people called it the deep time, a season not just of snow, but of slowness. And sleep wasn't just rest. It was survival, to conserve heat, to stretch food, to endure the dark. They bundled together, 3 or 4 in a bed, and told stories, or sang, or said nothing at all. Just listened to the wind outside and the breath beside them. Let's enter a monastery in January. The air inside the stone walls is biting. The monks sleep in wool robes, in long rows of narrow cots. No fires, too dangerous, and too indulgent. The cold is meant to sharpen their devotion, to remind them that comfort is not the goal. Sleep here is discipline. Each monk wraps himself tightly, says his prayers, and lies very still. Even dreams feel quieter here, like they too must follow the rules. Let's visit now a tavern. The fire is out, the ale gone, the laughter spent. A few guests remain, passed out at tables or curled by the hearth. The innkeeper locks the door, checks the shutters, and finally takes off her apron. She climbs the stairs, passes her sleeping children, steps into her room, and lies down. Not for long, just until the rooster. But in that short space, her body sinks, not into feathers, but into relief. Because running a tavern is harder than fighting a battle, and her rest, short as it is earned. Let's talk about rituals now, because even in a world without phones or light switches or bedtime podcasts, people had ways of telling their bodies, it's time. A cup of warm drink, a small prayer, a candle blown out with 3 breaths, one for God, one for safety, one for dreams. Some families sang a lullaby, even to adults. Some counted backwards from 10, not as a game, but as a gate. each number one step closer to the other side. Some made the sign of the cross on the pillow. Some spoke the names of their loved ones, one by one, like a rosary of memory. All of it said the same thing. This day is done. Now let me sleep. Let's return now to you. Your breath, your blanket, your room. Think of what your bed is made of. Not cotton and springs, but years, moments, memories. You've cried in it, laughed in it, held people, lost people. You've tossed and turned. You've stared at ceilings and wept into sheets. But always, always, the bed remained. Like a raft in a storm. Like a friend who doesn't talk, but listens. Like a promise you don't have to explain. Sleep is not just something that happens. It's something you return to. Like a well, like a shore, like home. So tonight, return. Let yourself fall. Let your weight melt into the mattress. Let your spine settle. Let your hands unclench. And let your breath, that old friend, do the rest. You are safe. You are here. You are tired. And that is enough. Let's begin not at night, but at that hour just before morning, the hour with no name, when the fire is ash, when dreams begin to dissolve, when the world holds its breath, not in fear, but in waiting. A pause, before the cock crows, before the pots rattle, before feet touch the cold floor and become busy again. This is when sleep is deepest, or lightest, or strangest, and always, always closest to something else. Let's stay here, in this in-between, and see what remains. Let's begin in a nunnery. The sisters rise soon. They will chant the lauds, the dawn prayers. But for now, they are still. Their breaths rise like steam in the cold air. Even in sleep, they are aligned. Silent rows under wool. Some dream of gardens, of scripture, of home. Some dream of nothing, not because they lack imagination, but because their days are full enough. The bell will toll in an hour, but until then, this is sacred. Not prayer, not labor, just being. Let's cross the country to a fisherman's hut. The nets are stacked, the boat tied, but the tide is right today. So he will rise early. He sleeps beside his tools, wrapped in a cloak that smells of salt. His dreams are not of fish, but of food, of fire, of a full belly. He stirs. The first gull cries, and before the sun, he's up, shoulders aching, but ready, because sleep is not forever, just a bridge. Let's talk now of awakening, because how we wake matters. Some rise with the sun, gentle and slow, stretching, yawning, blinking at the light like it's a visitor. Others rise like a storm, bolting up, already late, already anxious. In the medieval world, waking had its rituals too. A prayer, a splash of cold water, a kiss to a cross carved into wood. The day did not begin by accident. It began with intention. Even peasants whispered gratitude for breath. Even nobles paused to collect their thoughts before donning robes. Some believed the first words you spoke would shape your day. So they chose carefully. Let's listen in on a child, waking to the smell of porridge, to the creak of the door, to a mother's voice humming. They rub their eyes, kick off the blanket, and sit up, hair wild, knees knobby. For them, sleep was easy, and waking, a game. Let's not forget that. Sleep, when you're small, is not surrender. It's just turning off the world like a lantern, and waking is simply turning it on again. Let's now turn to the final kind of sleep, the one from which we do not wake. In the Middle Ages, death was not hidden. It was close. It came at night, often, in bed, surrounded by candles, with family whispering prayers and priests murmuring Latin. The body was washed, wrapped, watched. They called it a good death if it came in sleep. No pain, no screaming, just breath slowing, eyes softening, and then stillness. They believed that God preferred this, that the soul, unburdened by violence, could rise more easily. We don't know, but even now people say, if I must go, let it be in my sleep, because sleep is gentle, and death, for some, is just its longest version. Let's visit a graveyard. It is early. Mist clings to the headstones. A woman kneels by a mound of earth. She presses her hand to the stone. It bears a name, and a date, and a line of scripture long faded. She closes her eyes, and for a moment, she does not speak. She only breathes, and in that breath, her mind drifts to a time when that person laughed, when they snored, when they muttered in dreams, when they shared a bed, a secret, a silence. The memories come, soft, like sleep. She stands, wipes her eyes, and walks home, because life, too, continues. Let's speak now of first light. When sleep ends, when the world starts spinning again. In villages, it was marked by the rooster. In cities, by the sound of carts. In castles, by servants stirring fires. In monasteries, by bells. There was no snooze button, just light, and the strange knowledge that the day has begun. Whether you like it or not, some rose in joy, some rose in dread, some pretended to still be asleep for a few minutes longer. Just like us. Let's listen to a shepherd. He slept outside. The stars watched over him. He wakes to the sound of sheep, to the crunch of frost under hooves. He sits up, blanket over his shoulders, and watches the sky change color. He says nothing. He just watches, and in that stillness, there is peace. Let's speak of returning, because sleep, though daily, is also eternal. We return to it, night after night, year after year. In joy, in grief, in exhaustion, in celebration. We sleep beside lovers, beside strangers, beside enemies sometimes. We sleep alone, in castles and cellars and ships and shelters. We've slept through storms, through heartbreak, through revolutions, and always we rise. Not always stronger, but still rising. And that matters. Let's close this night with you. Yes, again, because you are the thread in all these stories. You, the listener, the dreamer, the breath and body in this exact moment. You carry centuries in your bones. And still, here you are. Not in a medieval bed, not in a shared straw mat, but here, tired, human, ready. Let your last thought be this. You are not alone, not in your weariness, not in your search for rest. Every person who ever lived has closed their eyes and drifted into that soft, sacred dark. You are one of them, and that makes this moment holy. So exhale, turn to your side, let your muscles forget their burden, and sleep, truly sleep, not because the day is done, but because you are allowed. And in that sleep, let the past hold you gently, like a lullaby older than language, like a blanket woven from stories. You are safe, you are seen, you are almost asleep, and that is enough. Good night.